The man who has spearheaded the killing of journalists, civilians, aid workers and starving people is finally having a taste of his own medicine, handed back to him in a stunning display of the world's outrage.
The Security Cabinet of the government of Benjamin Netanyahu had taken the decision to introduce forces into Gaza and to bring the Gaza Strip under the total control of the Israeli security forces with the aim, as the Israeli cabinet said, of defeating Hamas. These actions by the Israeli leadership are a gross violation of international law.
For years he has operated with impunity, counting on silence, complicity, and the blind loyalty of certain Western governments to shield him from accountability. But now the tide is shifting. 2 NATO allies have decided that enough is enough, and their actions, while shocking to some, are far more accurately described as inevitable. The patience of the international community is wearing thin, and for good reason. Please like and subscribe to support our effort. God bless you. During a United Nations meeting, the United Kingdom, which for decades has danced around words when it came to Israel's crimes, for the first time used exceptionally harsh language to condemn Israeli brutality in Gaza. The rebuke was so direct that it visibly stunned the Israeli ambassador sitting in the room, who was clearly unprepared to hear such unfiltered criticism from a government long seen as one of Israel's staunchest allies. Then, as if to drive another nail into the coffin of Israel's unchecked aggression, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese stepped up with an announcement that shook Netanyahu's Greater Israel dream to its core. Australia will officially recognise a Palestinian state next month, a move that undermines decades of Israeli expansionist policy and sends a resounding message that the world is no longer buying Tel Aviv's lies.
Today I can confirm that at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September, Australia will recognise the state of Palestine. Australia will recognise the right of the Palestinian people to a state of their own, predicated on the commitments Australia has received from the Palestinian Authority. We will work with the international community to make this right a reality. Australia is making this statement today following our Cabinet meeting as part of a coordinated global effort building momentum for a 2-state solution. Over the past fortnight, I have discussed this with Prime Minister Starmer, President Macron, Prime Minister Luxon and Prime Minister Ishaba, as well as Prime Minister Netanyahu last Thursday and President Abbas last Tuesday. A 2-state solution is humanity's best hope to break the cycle of violence in the Middle East and to bring an end to the conflict, suffering and starvation in Gaza. The international community's vision for a just and lasting peace in the Middle East always encompassed 2 states, living side by side with internationally recognised borders, a state of Israel and a state of Palestine, with security for the people of both nations.
At the United Nations, the British delegation didn't mince words. The UK representative openly described what Israel was doing in Gaza as a crime. Yes, they used that exact word, and called for immediate humanitarian access to a population that has been deliberately starved for months.
Expanding military operations will do nothing to bring an end to this conflict. It will not secure the release of the hostages. It will only deepen the suffering of Palestinian civilians in Gaza. We are clear that Hamas must disarm and can play no future part in the governance of Gaza, where the Palestinian Authority must have a central role. But, as many family members of the hostages have warned, this decision by the Israeli government will do nothing to secure the return of the hostages. Instead, it risks further endangering their lives. This escalation will only exacerbate an already catastrophic humanitarian crisis, uprooting 1 million more people and forcing them into dangerously overcrowded, unsanitary and undersupplied areas. In Gaza, children and babies are suffering from starvation. Hundreds of civilians have been killed trying to access basic food supplies. This inhumanity cannot be justified. We have a clear message for Israel. Urgently and permanently lift all restrictions on aid delivery. Yesterday, the UK announced a further $11.4 million for OCHA's Occupied Palestinian Territories Humanitarian Fund. It is vital that the UN and established humanitarian partners can operate safely and at scale. The UK will continue working with our partners on a long-term plan to secure peace in the region as part of a two-state solution. This is the only way to guarantee Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side in peace, security, and dignity.
Instead of seizing the opportunity to end the war, negotiate a peace settlement, and allow aid to flow to the millions trapped in Gaza, Netanyahu's response was as shameless as it was predictable. He issued a press statement dripping with propaganda, twisting reality in an attempt to manipulate global sympathy and justify the ongoing slaughter.
I think that we've not been winning it, to put it mildly. I think there are vast forces that are arrayed against us. Among other things, the algorithms of the social network that are driving a lot of everything else, you know, and people who really know, and they're the foremost people in this field in the world. They're telling me that about 60% of the responses on the social media are bots. They can categorically say they're bots, and they're bots that, you know, especially in America, you know, they want to attack the support that Israel has from the Republican side. So they describe how, you know, themselves as homespun Southerners, except they're riding from Asia somewhere, you know. That's a big issue. We have to contend with it, and we also have to stand up and tell the truth, probably at greater frequency than we're doing now. That's exactly what I'm trying to do now. But again, if you want to win this war, end it speedily.
His goal was clear: keep the world feeling guilty for even daring to question Israel's conduct, while buying himself more time to continue the campaign of destruction. Before we get to that video statement, let's first hear exactly what the UN Assistant Secretary General at Security Council said about Netanyahu's relentless war in Gaza. It's a moment worth replaying again and again.
Plans are implemented. They will likely trigger another calamity in Gaza, reverberating across the region and causing further forced displacements, killings and destruction, compounding the unbearable suffering of the population. Last night, thousands of protesters gathered in Tel Aviv and cities across Israel to call for a ceasefire and hostage release deal. The UN has been unequivocal. The only way to stop the immense human suffering in Gaza is through a full, immediate, and permanent ceasefire. All hostages must be released immediately and unconditionally. Israel must comply with its obligations under international humanitarian law, allowing rapid, safe, unimpeded, and large-scale delivery of humanitarian aid.
However, Netanyahu, who by all accounts should be facing trial at The Hague instead of walking into press rooms, remains desperate to convince the world that the actions of his military in Gaza somehow do not violate international law. This delusion is becoming harder to sell with each passing day. I watched one of his recent press releases, and I can tell you with absolute certainty the man is in panic mode. Insert his tone, his body language, everything about him screamed insecurity.
Talking in terms of a fairly short timetable, because we want to bring the war to an end. This is how we bring the war to an end. As far as the surge is concerned, we're talking to the U.S. about additional measures, but we haven't waited. Because what we're doing, as I said, is designate safe corridors, allow and expand the GHF distribution points, and we're trying to bring in more resources, hope to recruit some international organizations, maybe, God willing, the UN, if they ever decide to actually do something for the Palestinian people.
What Netanyahu hasn't yet grasped is that people around the world are waking up. They are turning away from the polished lies of the mainstream press and flocking instead to independent news sources like ours, where they can hear the unfiltered reality of what's happening on the ground. Public trust in mainstream media has hit an all-time low, and that collapse in credibility is shattering the very foundation of Netanyahu's media shield.
Yes, again, this doesn't make the horror of October 7th any less for the people who were killed and people who were taken captive, not at all. But if we want to solve it, if we want to make sure we never experience another October 7th again, we have to understand the context, not to justify, but to understand, to make sure that everybody is safe. The violence of October 7th is by a people who are under occupation, under oppression. It's not like America's fight with the Nazis, or certainly not like the Shoah, the Holocaust of Jews in Europe. It's much more like the Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya, or the Algerian violence against the French, which was brutal, or Native Americans who attacked American settlers. People who have been forced off their land were being oppressed and responded in really, really brutal ways. And unless you deal with that underlying structure of oppression and violence, you can't make everybody safe.
Right, and the whole point of the aftermath of World War II, the Geneva Convention and other things that were introduced, was to prevent some of the worst excesses of World War II on the Allied side, right? The carpet bombing of Dresden, for example. Yes. Most people agree that that was completely unnecessary, so they brought in the Geneva Convention to stop this stuff happening again. So I think the parallel again, when they try and throw that back at me to silence criticism of the government, it says, well, it's not an accurate comparison to be making. You made another very good point, I thought, which is. And only you could make this. I mean, I think only a Jewish person could say this, actually. You say in the book, we're not history's permanent virtuous victims. We are not hardwired to forever endure evil, but never commit it. That false innocence, which pervades contemporary Jewish life, camouflages domination as self-defense. It exempts Jews from external judgment. It offers infinite license to fallible human beings. Again, such an important point to make, because nobody is trying to, well, look, nobody with a rational mind is trying to deny what Jewish people have endured historically, not least in the Holocaust, or what happened on October the 7th. I mean, the scale of it was mind-blowingly horrific. 1,200 people murdered, 250 plus kidnapped, 7,000 more wounded. I mean, it was just on an unimaginable scale. But that doesn't mean that the Israeli government isn't now also perpetrating things which many people believe constitute war crimes.
Yes, and look, we as Jews are fully human, and being fully human means nothing is alien to us. Is that we can be victims and we can be victimizers just like every other group of human beings. And actually, our own sacred texts, the Hebrew Bible, Talmud, they actually make this point again and again and again. And in fact, there's nothing about having historically suffered abuse and violence and even genocide that means that you can't do it to other people, right? That happens, tragically, that happens throughout all the time in families, in human history. So we have to recognize about ourselves so we can actually guard against these tendencies, rather than always saying that every circumstance, even when the people of Gaza are suffering what's now widely being called a genocide, that we need to make this a story of Jewish victimhood. It's not.